7 steps in order to solve the problem of small boats crossing the channel. Can it be that easy? Well, that's what I'm going to attempt to lay out and maybe convince you that it can be done. And no, none of these ideas involve shooting the boats or anything quite that radical. But I do think the 7 steps that I'll lay out in this video would get the job done. And they're only, in some cases, a tiny bit controversial. So I think it's really achievable, and we've been told by politicians so many times now that there's no easy solutions, there's no small easy fix. Well, I disagree. I think some of the solutions are quite simple and are quite easy, and we just lack the political will to get anything done. Now, I've spent maybe an hour thinking about this video and how this could be achieved, which I think equates to about 100,000 hours of civil service thinking. So I think I'm on good ground. No, I don't have fully fledged policy documents. And yes, I'm sure if you drill down into the weeds, you can probably find some criticism of something I've said or some way that there's a small problem. All of these problems are man-made. They can be overcome, I guarantee it. These problems are not real physical hurdles and obstacles. They're just pieces of doctrine and ideas and thoughts and things written down on paper. It's really not that hard. It's not that complicated for a sovereign country, especially an island, to stop people coming on the small boats. So let's get into it. Let me start by telling you an approach that I wouldn't take, and it's this. I wouldn't take the approach of trying to smash the gangs. I think it's a misnomer, it's never going to work. It's just a fool's idea. And this is why. These gangs form part of a network. Whenever a key individual or a small group of individuals is removed from this network, there are other people ready and willing to take that place. You know, we're not talking about gangs as in like 3 or 4 guys are doing all of these crossings. That's not true. It's a huge criminal enterprise. And unless you can tackle the entire criminal enterprise, root and stem, given that it's based overseas, you know, this is just completely unfeasible. How are you going to like tackle an entire mafia in Turkey? It's just impossible. Even if you took out all of the people involved in crossing the channel, they would just find new people. The organisation would still remain. Their one line of business is not simply getting people across the channel. So it's pointless. And, you know, think about how hard it must be for the police to investigate criminals who are acting overseas in Turkey and then with their little spider's web going all the way out through to France. It's just a total non-starter. And look, the money in it, the business is so good that they're not going to give this up. So I understand why people are appealed to this logic of smashing the gangs, you know, going to the root cause, because people can say that and they can pretend they've got a plan without pretending that a big part of the problem is the migrants themselves. They'll say, oh, it's the traffickers, it's the gangs, and it gives them an easy out, an easy solution, and it looks like they're going to the root of the problem, but they're not going to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is very, very different. It's not the gangs are providing a service. The root of the problem is that our asylum system is very generous, very, very easy to manipulate, and our country is very generous, socialist utopia when you actually arrive here. That's the root of the problem, unfortunately. Okay, step 1, and this is, I think, really obvious, and you probably think this is already happening, and it isn't. Every person who crosses the channel, so enters the country illegally, they should have their names and their identities cross-referenced against international police and crime databases. Now, you, like I said, probably think this is happening, and I will tell you for a fact that it isn't. And we know this because a 21-year-old man came to the UK, said he was 16, and we put him in a British school. It was only when he went and murdered a British citizen that we discovered that he'd also killed 2 people in Serbia. He was wanted in Serbia, and we had no idea. He was a 21-year-old man pretending to be 16, and we put this double murderer into a school. That's so shocking, or at least it should be. That should have sent shockwaves to my mind, similar to the awful, awful case of Southport, because this was entirely preventable. A little bit of research would have allowed us to understand exactly who this guy was. Now, of course, what you're going to say is, well, what if they come over without documents or identities, or we don't know who they are? Okay, that strikes me as a massive security risk. This guy's coming here, presumably deliberately, though it could be by accident, with absolutely no documentation, no identification, no way of us knowing who he is. Immediately, my alarm bells are ringing really, really ringing. So he left his country and lost all of his documents. I know this might sound a little bit controversial to some people, but that strikes me as immediate detention indefinitely until his identity can be attained and we can understand who he is. Step number 2, have the Royal Navy patrol the channel and quite simply tow small boats back to France. Very quickly they would stop coming because the Royal Navy would be effective in preventing these migrants coming over the channel. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, that's impossible, the French would never allow it. I think they would. Presumably, they took hundreds of millions of pounds off us so that they could prevent migrant crossings. So why should they now be upset if we, say, give them a helping hand with the Royal Navy? What's the problem there? You took the money to prevent the crossings, and all we're doing is still giving you the money and adding a little bit of extra assistance to make sure that you achieve your aim. Now, if the French started saying, oh, well, we can't do that, we don't want to take these people back, well, then stop taking the money. Because clearly that's just disingenuous at that point. I think there could be difficulties there, but ultimately, are the French going to start shooting at Navy ships? I think it's very unlikely. Step 3, nice and simple. Leave the ECHR, the European Convention for Human Rights. Really what that means is removing all legacy ECHR doctrine from UK law. Getting rid of it, replacing it with a UK human rights bill that doesn't allow our asylum system and our laws to be weaponised against us. And I understand it sounds crazy, like, oh, you're getting rid of the Convention on Human Rights? You don't like human rights? Of course I like human rights. I don't like bad law that is massively to our detriment, that's effectively detracting from what we actually think of as the good cause of human rights and is therefore just being abused. That's what we need to get rid of. So, gone. Okay, step 4, and we're starting to get a little bit more controversial now. Build camps. Build refugee camps, detention camps, whatever you want to call them. Does anything in our law or the ECHR say that people have to be housed in 4-star accommodation at the taxpayer expense, costing, by the way, almost £6 billion, 5.8 I think is the number. And to put that number into perspective, the winter fuel allowance cut saving is only a quarter of that £6 billion. It's an enormous amount of money that we simply don't have to be spending. We don't have to house people in hotels. We can put them in camps, just like they do in many other countries. I'm talking about, Jordan for refugees, Turkey for refugees, etc., etc. Why do people come here? Well, I'll tell you what, they come here because the hotels are a pull factor, right? People see that, and would you rather be in a hotel for the next 2 years because the asylum claim backlog is so large? Would you rather just chill out in a hotel in the UK and get pocket money and a little debit card? Yeah, probably, of course you would. It's a huge pull factor. Get rid of the pull factor. Some of you at this point will be thinking, oh, well, how do we build those camps? Who could build them? I know exactly who can build them. The Royal Engineers, probably with a bit of help from the Royal Logistics Corps and maybe some Royal Signallers. It can be done very, very easily. I know it can because I've lived in these kinds of camps. We called them tent cities. And of course, they were only built to house maybe 1,000 people, but it's a scalable model. So I think at the point where we have this national crisis of people just flooding over our border with no identification and we have no idea who they are, that's a national security threat. So using the military in order to build camps and detain these people securely makes a lot of sense to me. They can still have heating. We had heaters, kerosene heaters in the tents. They can still have toilets and food and all of that good stuff. The military knows how to build and prepare all of that. Not only have we done it in the UK countless times on MOD land, we've done it overseas. We've done it in Afghanistan. These guys can build these things very, very quickly. The MOD has the land, has the resources, and has the skills to build these things. We just choose not to. Now, of course, you probably want to have a joint police and military, I guess, like guard force in order to both protect these people and also to secure them in place. I understand that there's a lot of logistics that would need to be worked out, but honestly, put a good couple of Royal Engineers captains, if you can find any, in a room with a few police officers, you'll get this sorted pretty quickly. The army is quite good at putting out fires, solving problems on the fly, because we create all of our own problems and then we have to solve them, so we're good at that. And it can be done. I absolutely guarantee you it can be done. To the scale of 100,000 people would be obviously a very, very big struggle. But you could at least start bringing down the numbers of people in hotels using this method. Now, of course, there's probably going to be people who dissent and say, I don't want that in my local neighbourhood, all the NIMBYs and all that good stuff. But what you have to assure people is that they're going to be detained in this area, okay? They're going to be staying in this area. They're not going to be coming in your local town, for example. They're going to be in this small corner off in Salisbury Plain, or wherever it may happen to be. It doesn't have to be Salisbury Plain. And that's the thing, a lot of people were upset about the RAF bases being used because there would have been no holding those people in that area. That's where they'd be accommodated, but then they'd be free to come and go and leave and go wherever they want and do whatever they want. That's what scares people about having this in their local communities. So I think that can be done. I think that can be readily achieved. It's not that difficult. The army can sort it. Okay, step 5, and now we're really getting controversial. Don't allow any asylum claims from anyone who is not a neighbour of Britain. I can already tell people are going to lose their minds, but I don't understand why this is all that controversial. Of course, in the Bosnian War, for example, lots of Bosnian refugees and Serbs and Croats fled to Europe. Why? Because next door neighbour of the Balkans is Europe, so of course they were going to go that way. But the next door neighbour of, Middle Africa and North Africa is not, the UK, for example. The next door neighbour to Syria is Jordan or Turkey, and that's where it makes sense to go to for your asylum claim. You're being persecuted, and yes, in 2015 and 2014, lots and lots of Syrians were running for their lives. I just want to stress that and make that absolutely clear. Of course they were, because you had the Syrian civil war followed by ISIS. But then what we start to see is our systems be abused and people flooding into the UK. Why does it make sense for you to flee from Syria all the way to the UK? And why does it make sense for the UK to even allow that? When the 1951 UN Convention on Refugees was written, I'm pretty sure what they had in mind was the Second World War. Europeans fleeing from other European countries in a time of crisis and war. And they wanted to make sure that if something like that ever happened again, Europeans would have a place to go within Europe. Now, I want to make a few things clear. I genuinely do think that this makes a lot of sense. I think if France had a tremendous amount of turmoil, then we should be willing to take in French refugees because they are our neighbour. Same for Ireland, for example. So it's not that I'm saying we would never take refugees or asylum seekers. It's that we should be geographically limiting where those asylum claims can come from to areas that simply make sense and have, cultural traditions shared with us, and and there's no possibility of someone just trying to abuse the system. Nobody from France, no French people are jumping on small boats to come into the UK to try and take advantage of our welfare state, right? That's just not happening. So a few of the things I want to make clear, right? This doesn't mean that we can't ever help people who are in the Middle East and North Africa. So when, as they did, Jordan took an enormous number of refugees, we can of course send them aid, we can send them assistance, as you would expect. We can send them military assistance if they require it, food, medical supplies, doctors if we can find any that we can spare, military medics, probably a better thing to send, frankly. So there are things that we can do to assist those countries. Financially as well, we can assist those countries. And we can help them with that burden. Then what you'll find is that people within Syria are claiming asylum in countries that are geographically close to them and also culturally similar to them. That, to me, makes a lot more sense. I actually think that's kind and not cruel at all. The second thing that I want to sort of draw out is that we should have like a special clause. So if someone has assisted Britain overseas, wherever it may be, so let's give an example. An Afghan interpreter in Afghanistan who worked for the British for a number of years. Now, all of a sudden, everything in Afghanistan's gone a bit awry, the Taliban have taken over, and he's fearing for his life. Yes, we should take those individuals. So if his assisting Britain overseas has caused him to be, in the direct line of harm for the work that he did assisting us, absolutely we have a responsibility to take those people in. I really don't see it any other way. I mean, failure to enact a policy like that, quite frankly, will just mean that in the future, nobody will ever help Britain out. You won't have any people who are willing to spy for you for MI6. You won't have people who are willing to work for you translating or anything like that. Nobody will ever take any risks, ever, globally, to support Britain if Britain has a history of completely turning their back on those people. So yeah, there's a couple of clauses where we would take people from faraway lands if they've directly helped Britain. Okay, step 7. Step 7 is deportations, and I've tied into all of the other points a little bit of talking about this, but you're probably wondering what happens to people who are in the camps but we don't actually have any idea where to deport people to. Yeah, it's a difficult situation, so I would say the best thing to do is work out returns deals with neighbouring countries to where they say they're from. So if a guy says he's from Syria, then you work out a returns deal and say, well, that's okay, well, we're going to send you to Jordan on a flight and you'll be cared for there. Now, of course, Jordan are going to want some kind of financial recompense for doing that. And we could even go to quite a high figure, £100,000, £150,000, whatever it may be. Fully covers the cost of that individual, I have absolutely no doubt. And it wouldn't actually cost that much money overall, because very quickly people will stop coming to the UK. So you've ruled out people from the Middle East, even and North Africa, ever claiming asylum, less for very special circumstances. So they're going to stop coming. And when they do come for some bizarre reason, they immediately get sent back to Jordan, where they could have just stopped off in the first place. Very quickly, people are going to stop coming over small boats to the UK. It's just not going to happen anymore. So those 7 steps, and some of them will be a bit too unpalatable for people. They'll be a bit too unkind or unfriendly. We're well past that. We are genuinely in a national crisis, a security crisis. Every government acknowledges it. Rishi Sunak ran on the message of stop the boats. Did he stop the boats? Of course he didn't stop the boats. Keir Starmer said he's going to smash the gangs. Is he going to smash the gangs? Of course he isn't going to smash the gangs. He might arrest 1 or 2 people, and nevertheless he'll be mystified that the boats keep coming and people keep coming over the channel. So the 7 steps I've laid out, I think in conjunction would work. You don't have to take all of the 7 steps. If you think one of the measures is a little bit too extreme, well, I think you're a bit wet, but you can definitely still cut that out. All of this comes down to creating what's called a hostile environment. Now, David Cameron, when he came into office, promised that he would create a hostile environment to stop this thing happening. And he didn't. Of course, it just simply never happened. But that was the idea. And really, I don't know if you've heard the phrase, if you're running away from a bear, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the other person, okay? Because the bear's going to get them and you're going to keep running away. And it's kind of similar in this situation. You just have to make the UK significantly less desirable a place to come than, say, Germany or France, right? So you have to create this race to the bottom of making it a more hostile environment for people who want to illegally come over the channel. And once you've created a worse environment, people will just choose to go elsewhere. It's just logical, rational thinking. Whilst you're creating a really good environment, people will continue to come. So what do you think to that system? It's a system which I think is coherent. Everything makes sense together. I think it's functional. I think it would work. The obstacles are man-made obstacles that could be very, very easily, I think, overcome with a little bit of thought, a little bit of reasoning, a little bit of negotiation, lawyering, all that good stuff. There's nothing in here which is so impossible that it can't be overcome. I don't think. There are probably the biggest problems that people will face are ethical problems, particularly around steps like not taking asylum seekers from countries that are very far away from Britain. So that's effectively what that comes down to, is political will. Do you have a party with the political will to make decisions like that in order to stop this crisis? Or do we allow this crisis to continue unfettered and we make no effort to change things whatsoever? That's kind of where we're at, Do you want to be the really, really, really nice guys of the world all the time? Or do you want to start actually addressing the problems? And you can't always be nice and perfect and pristine to address the problems. You just can't do that. And also I question whether allowing people with no identification into the UK is actually nice. We have no idea what their criminal histories are, and we're potentially just endangering our own citizens to prioritise citizens of the world who have mysteriously lost all of their documentation. So I'm pretty skeptical that trying to take the nice route and the virtue signalling route is even actually ethically superior. Honestly, I don't believe it probably is. Anyway, let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. I will reply to them all. I'm sure I'll have some comments from people who are calling me a fascist or something like that. You are of course welcome to your opinion. It's just a solution that I have put forwards. You may not like it, you may like it, you may not like all of it. There we go.